really warm this month because it's going to get cold and snow. By the way, hopefully we won't get an atmospheric river like California got. Have you heard about that? Yeah, they're calling it an atmospheric river because it's raining so hard. They got nearly 6 inches of rain in less than 20 hours in Sacramento. And they've had they've been in the middle of one of the worst, well, the worst drought on recorded history. So they weren't ready for rain, let alone 6 inches. Could you imagine Helena getting 6 inches of rain? I guess we could, but I mean, 1 inch of rain is like chaos here. So that used to be a once in 100-year storm. It's probably going to be once a year storm now. But it's just unreal. We are on the edge of it. It did the same thing in Seattle, about 4.5 inches. But it's gonna. That's why tomorrow it's going to get cooler. Tonight it's going to be cooler and rain. This is Montana, so we'll get an eighth of an inch. But if that, maybe 0.1 of an inch. And so what is it called where Jefferson, jumping right in, where Jefferson would be, he might say one thing, but then it's necessary to do something totally opposite. What do we call that? Yeah, that's pragmatic. And what is the name of a farmer who owns their own land? What, someone said it? Yeoman, yeah, yeoman. And the whole idea is if you own your own land, you are truly free. Why am I doing this? And what is it called? Hands off of government, because he believed government will only help big and monopolies. Yeah, laissez-faire or laissez-faire, depending on what country you're in. In America, we will mispronounce it as laissez-faire all the time. And I should add, he's still thinking pre-capitalism. The Industrial Revolution is not his. And hands off with economies of scale has absolutely different things down the road. And we got the Enabling Act. So let's jump. This is where we're going to go right here. We mentioned Johnny Appleseed, a real Republican who walked through and planted apple seeds. And oh, by the way, what do you make from apples? It wasn't the app selling the apples. What was it that made the money? Hard cider. They drink a lot of alcohol back then. A lot. Now, people today do not drink near as much. We're not going to do this land policy, so we're going to jump right to the Barbary Pirates. So while this is going on, there's going to be a war in the Mediterranean. There are pirates that are along this. This is loosely territory of the Ottoman Empire, which is based here at Constantinople. But they're basically individual principalities or sultanates all along here. And these were sometimes, and basically these little city-states here were fortified cities, and they made their money by pirating. They had pirates all along the coast of the Mediterranean. They would take slaves all along this coast. In fact, if you go to any city along here, if it's a city that survived the Middle Ages through this era, they're a walled city because of the threat of pirates. And so this huge slave trade, the Americans did sign a treaty with them, with a couple of these little sultanates, which are like a principality, to stop the pirating. But when Jefferson became president, basically at Tripoli and Tunis, which are today modern Libya and Tunisia, they began to, or more pirating, now stopping American-owned merchant vessels. Jefferson basically said, why don't you follow the treaty? And they ignored Jefferson, who's the United States. So Jefferson, without a declaration of war, sent the tiny little U.S. Navy with a few ships, and they've already cut back on the size of the Navy. I was just checking to make sure everyone's doing okay. Yeah, I would do that. In the middle of a word and just be gone. So this was an undeclared war. This was his pragmatic approach. And yes, there was naval infantry called Marines. They did this along with some mercenaries, shelled and then stormed the little fortified city of Tripoli. It actually, the war was a failure, but they did take the fort, and this would be forever memorialized in the Marine hymn. So the Song for the Marine starts with the Halls of Montezuma, which is from the Mexican War, from the Halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. And it failed, but it also showed that this was Jefferson's pragmatic approach. He was all opposed to the declaration of war, even talked nullification of the quasi-war. No declaration of war, how dare they do this, and then turned around and sent Marines in the U.S., the tiny little U.S. Navy here. So, with that, also construction began on what's called the Cumberland Road. And this was a road funded by the federal government, which is the norm. All the roads today are funded by the federal government, by taxpayer money from all over the United States. But back then, this was a big deal across territories. We finished in 1811. And there were no roads. This was a macadamized road. Most of the road is now a national park. They were still using this road from 1811. They were still using it for cars into the 1970s. That's how well built these roads are. Today, roads are purposely made to break very quickly. To break, that's a weird way to put it. To wear out, to be replaced quickly. So they constantly have to pump money into local economies from the federal government. So they constantly have to remake it. So you wonder why there's constant construction? That's on purpose. I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, but that's the way we do it in the United States. And this was a real big issue of federalism, because when these were territories, it made sense. Of course, you can build a federal road in a federal territory, but what happens if they're states? Can a federal government build a road in a state? And this was unclear, and this would be a very divisive issue all the way to the Civil War. And how do you pay for it? Yeah, if you ever get a chance, go on this. You can go on big long stretches of it. Now there's a big hiking trip where there's hiking trail on the road. It's really cool. It's well built, and the Park Service, does an amazing job. And so, if you get a chance, go see it. I know what you're thinking. It's a road. How interesting could a road be? It's really cool. So we're going to jump right to here. So part of the reason they built this road, though, and eventually we get to the Missouri River. By the way, there's no other permanent roads anywhere outside the cities. For the most part, they're just wagon runs. Jefferson was obsessed with this land. Remember we talked about him wanting to move the American Indians who lived here, move them here to open this up to small farms and plantations? He wanted this land, but more importantly, he was fearful that if this area here, like Ohio, which just became a state, if they couldn't get their goods to market, they might leave the Union. There were 3 attempted efforts to break away the old Northwest, the old Southwest, and here and form their own country. 3 separate efforts. One including the vice president, a guy by the name of Burr. And so they were really scared. And so he needed New Orleans. So Jefferson, he thought, we're going to open this up. First thing we need is New Orleans. Spain got New Orleans in 1763 in the Treaty of Paris. But in a secret treaty in 1801, France had the claim again. So we're leading to the Louisiana Purchase. And originally it was to buy New Orleans. So this is a picture of New Orleans right after the U.S. got it. And here's the symbolic raising of the American flag. But the funny thing was, the people, the colonists who settled here in New Orleans, and the other big city was St. Louis, well, tiny city, but city, they still thought they were Spain, part of New Spain. They didn't even know about the secret treaty. Only a few people do, including Jefferson. And Jefferson sent emissaries to the new emperor of France, who made himself emperor after the French Revolution and the wars that followed. Who's that guy? Yes, Napoleon, who's quite the dashing figure as a young man, but years of campaigning, well, that took a toll on his body. No, he was not short. But everybody thinks Napoleon was short. No, that was British propaganda. You're not a real man, you're short. Yeah, still. But all this area here, so let's jump right to here. When the two emissaries, Robert Livingston and James Monroe, future president, got there, Jefferson or Napoleon shot them and said, I'll sell you the land claim to all the Louisiana territory, aka the Louisiana Purchase. You notice I put down the land claim. That's the claim to the Europeans. Technically, by law, the people who lived here had the claim unless it was taken away from them by treaty, which would happen here with the Treaty of Greenville. So don't forget that. So this is some shenanigans ignoring the people who lived here. But they offered them the whole thing, not just New Orleans, at about $15 million or 3 cents an acre. Okay, there's been a lot of inflation, but even then that was seen as kind of a steal just for New Orleans. Livingston and Monroe knew they had no authority to buy all of Louisiana. It was unclear if they had the authority to buy New Orleans. So what did they say when Napoleon's emissary said, hey, do you want the whole thing? Yes, we'll buy it. We'll solve it when we get back to Washington, D.C. So they quick bought it and signed a treaty. There's the signing of the treaty. And then they fled just in time because Napoleon changed his mind. Napoleon changed his mind, but they got out of France before they could be called back and rip the treaty up. So there were two constitutional issues. The first one, was it constitutional to buy land? That's nowhere in the Constitution does it says, yes, it's implied. But remember Jefferson's whole thing about strict interpretation of the Constitution? Remember the Bank of the United States. But the biggest issue that Federalists really complained about was, does the Constitution follow the flag? Will any of this new territory have the same rights as the previously owned territory? And if they create any states, will these states be equal to these states? Federalists were terrified that if they bought this land and they built states, so it became states, they would be Republican states and the Federalists would be overwhelmed. Remember, it doesn't matter the size of the state. Every state gets 2 senators. That's a lot of potential Republican senators. Now remember, this is the old Republican Party, not the current Republican Party. Well, it's complex, I'll get to it. And that was the big issue. But Jefferson steamrolled it. The idea of getting this land, or at least the claim, was more popular, and the treaty passed with a 2/3 vote. So it did pass Congress a treaty. Please write that down, a treaty. I forgot to put that down, it's a treaty. Here's the thing though, why did Napoleon sell this so cheaply and so easily? Napoleon was thinking about a North American empire. But the big thing he wanted was the money from the Sugar Islands. The problem was this. France still had a colony named Santo Domingo, today we call Haiti. It's the eastern side of the island of Hispaniola. And in the 1790s, specifically 1791, there was a horrific slave rebellion. By the way, that's redundant. Slave rebellions, by definition, are the most horrible things imaginable. Here are 2 pictures of it. Here are actually the slaves fighting against the French. And here was a supposed massacre of French nationals who were killed by slaves. Slaves know what will happen to them if the rebellion fails. They will be tortured to death. And they know it. So there's no prisoners taken. They also, the masters know how bad they treat the slaves. They know the desire for revenge. So they use terror. It's hard to come up with anything more awful than slave rebellion. There's a reason why Southerners, people like, let me throw a name out, Thomas Jefferson, feared them so much. So the rebellion led by Toussaint Louverture, and this is a watercolor of him, won. By 1794, 1795, they had created Haiti, an independent country. This would also be called a slave republic or a black republic in the United States. By the way, the Federalist government under John Adams recognized it as a country. Napoleon, if he wanted a North American empire, needed it back. So Napoleon in 1801 sent 17,000 troops, and it was a disaster. Not only with the guerrilla fighting, and they were totally ill prepared for the guerrilla fighting. They've been fighting linear, line up the men, fight shoulder to shoulder on European battlefields, experienced French soldiers, but they couldn't fight the guerrilla war. They weren't ready for it. And yellow fever decimated them. This disaster would lead them to sell the plane. It's one of the great what-ifs in history. If the French could have held it for a couple more years, who knows what would have happened? Seriously, who knows? We'd probably be speaking what? Bulgarian, almost without a doubt. I mean, it's just simple math. One more thing. What did Jefferson think about the slave rebellion? What did Jefferson think about the new country of Haiti? What did Jefferson think about Napoleon trying to get it back? Jefferson actually helped Napoleon try to get it back. Which makes no sense, I know. Jefferson actually did everything he can to destroy the new country of Haiti and failed. Ironically, it would be Napoleon failing that got allowed him to get the Louisiana Purchase. Why did Jefferson and every future president to Abraham Lincoln try everything they can to destroy Haiti? Fear of slave rebellion. So Jefferson's talk about all men created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, yeah, but I slaves. So that's giving an idea of what slavery would do to the country. Slavery got its tentacles into everything, including supporting slavers and going against a group of people fighting for independence and freedom. Slavery, wow. So, that leads to the Corps discovery. Now, Jefferson was already planning the Corps discovery as a secret military operation to walk through here. They thought if they could walk somebody through here, that gave them a stronger claim than what Spain or France had. And more importantly, walk through the Oregon country. The US, Britain, Spain, and Russia all claimed this land outside the people who lived here. If they could walk somebody through here, that would give the United States a better claim. He had tried 3 different times before. All had failed, never got really even close. Okay, one guy tried to walk across Russia and made it about halfway. He was going to walk across Russia and leave a footboat here and go this way. He didn't make it. He beat him by camels. That's another story. But the secret operation became public, called the Corps discovery, when they bought the Louisiana Purchase. So they went to know they could go to St. Louis in the open and prepare and leave in 1804. Meriwether Lewis, who was in the bottom there, there's that very famous picture. It's on every book I think there is. That painting of him. He was a personal secretary for Jefferson. Jefferson knew his brother, George Rogers Clark, remember him in the Revolutionary War. And he offered Meriwether Lewis the captainship. Lewis accepted it. But then Lewis, knowing the problems of leading this nearly 40-man military expedition across, well, they have no idea what they're getting into, would pick, that's it Meriwether Lewis's brother, George Rogers Clark? I jumped the gun, I'm sorry. Meriwether Lewis picked William Clark, whose brother was George Rogers Clark. Sorry about that, my mind was something else. Still mad about my PR things. And the thing was, all the men are going to take journals. This is going to be a very in-depth mission to do research, to find scientific discovery, to open up trade routes. But everyone only talks about, and this picture I just put up there because I think it's kind of funny, no one ever talks about anybody but just a few people. So all the other men, they don't talk about, but here's Lewis and Clark. Clark brought his slave, York. It should also tell you something. So he's in a lot of these. Charbonneau was a trader they picked up and contracted out to join them. And Charbonneau's wife was whom? It's probably Sacagawea, but everyone says Sacagawea because they kind of mispronounce it, but we're not sure, but phonetically it looks like Sacagawea. But anyways, they don't talk about the rest of them. And they would take off in 1804. And they knew certain things along the trip. So let's get to the 4 things the plan was. Open up trade routes. Specifically, trade, the fur trade. There was already British and French competitors here. They wanted to get the fur trader. There was a fur trading port right here. Basically, think of a more just like a base at a large village of the Mandan tribe here near present-day Bismarck, North Dakota. Right here. And they knew where that was. And they wanted to open up trade here. They heard about incredible opportunities for trade. And the beaver trade was still very big. They also knew the latitude of the Cumberland. They knew that. So open up trade. They would give various tribes this medal. This would turn into a necklace. That's why it has that. But Jefferson on one side, and then peace and friendship on the other. Which I should have warned the tribes about that one. And that was the plan. Next, ports. And they want to get these really good ports on for the China trade. China was erupting in a massive amount of trade. It was being opened up for the first time. China was really opened up to foreign traders to exploit opium. They started to crush China. There's fact to be 2 wars fought about that. U.S. merchants are going to take advantage of it. So they wanted these good ports, really good ports here. Right, one more thing down to whaling too. This is also for whaling ports. Right along here was some of the best whaling anybody had seen. So in the late 1700s, whaling vessels along this port just slaughtered whales. Basically got rid of them. There was no whale. And so they were beginning to go to here. That's why the U.S. would eventually take what the British called the Sandwich Islands. Have you heard of those? I think you're going. Because today it's the state of Hawaii. It's for whaling. That's what the U.S. got. Conquered it and then made a mistake. Next, science. Every man was supposed to write a journal. They took really very good maps. Here's a map based upon their drawing, especially Clark's map making of up the Missouri, the Yellowstone, because Clark came back on the Yellowstone on the way back. They didn't know much about the mountains, so they just draw these long lines because the Appalachian Mountains were like that. And so, really impressive maps, at least along the river and the areas they could see. And they're also going to see what kind of animals, the flora and fauna. And they made some amazing discoveries there. And they also heard a few amazing things. Because of the Industrial Revolution, there was more mining of coal and iron. It was just beginning in Britain. And canal building, and they were finding all kinds of amazing things that they just discounted before. Today we call them fossils. And it blew them away. Where are these animals? Why, they must be here. So, yes, they thought what we call today dinosaurs would be there. They also, in Siberia, they just found, in eastern Siberia, Russian traders found a frozen woolly mammoth that was almost perfectly intact. And they thought, well, they got to be woolly mammoths here. There were, but not. But they assumed they'd still be around. Yes, they ate. My guess is price for meat, because it's only about 14,000 years old. I rarely eat meat that old. Yeah, they really did. Still trying to ponder that. They were hungry. But they also thought there'd be all these strange creatures they would find there, all kinds of things they would find. Let me give you a picture of things that the Spanish said they found. So the Spanish said they found these guys with faces in their chests. Big-feeted men were shaved with their feet. Strange two-headed thing, one-eyed cyclopses. I know, that would have been awesome. The chest-face guy would have been so awesome. But my favorite is they thought there'd be relatively short, bandy arms, so muscular arm. I'd imagine guys like this. Europeans, bearded, speaking Welsh. Why didn't they find them? I'm not sure how they found them, but it was noted. Look for the bandy arm Welshmen. They did not find them. They're still around. There was Sasquatch. But moving on. The last loop was the Northwest Passage. And they've been looking for a route over the Arctic. All through the exploration era, well, they found lots of ice. Yes, because of climate change, it looks like that Northwest Passage will be open full time, which one of the many effects of climate change. Of course, the ocean will rise a few feet, and there it is, but that's another story down the road. But they knew this latitude. They knew this latitude. They knew the Missouri turned west. So the assumption was they turn west, go over a quick low hump of mountains, boom, the Columbia. And that would be an all-water route to China. And at a time before the Industrial Revolution, where everything moved at 3 miles per hour, an all-water route meant a lot. And they thought this would be a low hump of basically straight, flat mountains, almost the best way to look at them, about 6,000 feet, just kind of flat lines of mountains. Because that's what the Appalachian Mountains were. So they just assumed it'd be symmetrical, it'd be long lines of mountains. That's why in that picture there, they show them as long lines. Now, the Appalachian Mountains are millions of years older than the Rockies, and that's why they've been eroded to that. The Rockies aren't like that. By the way, if you ever fly to, let's say, New York City or Washington, D.C., and fly over the Appalachian Mountains, look out the window, they're really pretty amazing. They're like these, they literally are just these lines. Long line mountain, valley, line, valley. So you can see why they thought it was a wall, but they just assumed relatively low mountains, boom, there. In fact, when they got in a horrific trip, it took a year and a half, they got to the Three Forks, they named after President Jefferson, Secretary of State Madison, and Secretary of the Treasury Gallatin. Those are the three rivers that made up the Missouri. When they went to Jefferson, the furthest western one, and Lewis followed a little creek south of what is present-day Dillon, up the mountains, he thought when he got to the top, past the little creek, he thought he would see a broad plain in the Columbia. And what did he see? Lots and lots of mountains. Thus ended the trek, or the path, the search for the Northwest Passage. Until climate change. So that's the basic elements of Lewis and Clark. And the thought was, oh, we're not going to get here, right here. The thought was about a year to get to here. They'd find a trading vessel, because there were routine trading vessels with the various tribes here. They'd hop on that, go all the way around South America, which was the fastest way, a lot faster than walking. They'd ride back in Washington, D.C. sometime in the spring or summer of 1805. That's what the assumption was. Is that what happened? It took them all summer, well into the winter of 1804 to make to the Mandan village. It turned out pulling keelboats up the Missouri was a heck of a lot harder than they thought. And that's where you get all kinds of creative words for the word mosquito, which must have been really pleasant for the trip. They didn't find the bandy-armed Welshmen, and they didn't find the woolly mammoths. They did find really fast goats. What are the fast goats? Yeah, pronghorn antelopes. They also saw seas of bison. There were probably as many as 60 million bison on the plains. There were probably 40 million before the Europeans arrived. The disease ravaged so many of the plains tribes that the numbers of bison went up. Most of you probably know what's going to happen over the next 80 years. We'll go down to almost nothing. It's an absolute miracle there's any left. And they heard about a really big bear, a plains animal called, well, you might have heard of it, called a grizzly bear. And they were desperate to find the bear. Then they found the bear, in which they had never found the bear. What's that?
My dad's a game with it, and there's just so many grizzly bear tracks there's just been tracking in this year a lot.
Yeah, there's been a bunch, and in fact, there's one near Ovanda that was really terrifying.
Yeah, one of them ate in California a couple months ago. Kind of karma for coming to Montana, but who am I to judge?
But they also found a prairie dog, which really interested them, and they spent almost a day getting a prairie dog back to Jefferson. And Jefferson's like, oh, God, I got a prairie dog. Yes, it was still alive. And if you go to the White House today, the prairie dog still runs around the White House. And so, alive. But this was a miserable trip. They wouldn't have made it with the help of various tribes, especially the Nez Perce. Only you could warn the Nez Perce. The Spanish sent 3 expeditions to stop them and just barely missed them. And if the Spanish would have stopped them, the expedition would be nothing more than a footnote of history. One of those, huh? Yeah. They sent on an expedition that disappeared. The Spanish would have killed them all. And they made it here in 1805 in the winter, spent a miserable winter here. If you ever get a chance, go to the fort, it's called Fort Platts up here, and you can see why it was just miserable. No trading vessel came back, so they spent all the summer of 1806 and made it back. I know I went the very fast version of Lewis and Clark. I know there's more stories, but while that's going on, Jefferson sent, for example, Zebulon Pike in another expedition here. We then go through Colorado. Yes, Pike Peak named after him. They'd be captured by the Spanish, going to be imprisoned in Mexico City. They escaped and walked 1,000 miles across the desert and made it out. It's an amazing story, but no one ever talks about it, so we talk about Lewis and Clark. And with that, the U.S. would get a better claim, but we'll come back to that. We're jumping right to this. Why did I put these 2 pistols up here? Those are Alexander Hamilton's dueling pistols. And they're actually in a bank in Boston. If you go to the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston, they're there. Why in Boston? I have no idea, but they're in Boston. And what happened was this. Burr got tangled up in maybe a plot to break away New England and form its own country. And also Burr tried to run for governor of New York. And who opposed him? Hamilton exposed this. And they started a letter-writing campaign in newspapers, where eventually culminated with Hamilton saying Burr is a man who does not know what the truth looks like. AKA, Burr is a what? Liar! Burr, whose political career looked done, and Hamilton's political career looked done. So think about 2 desperate men, both of them with huge debts. Nobody likes them. Both of them thought they had no choice but to save face, specifically honor. Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel, and Hamilton accepted. Now, there were duels fought all the time. Now, most duels, it would be, so Carla, I challenge you to a duel. You accept.
Sure.
And that'd be fine. We're done. We're not psychopaths, probably. We're not going to kill each other. We're not backing down, right? And that would be the duel. We both agreed to defend our honor, but we're not going to shoot each other. But they both thought we have to take this to the next step. Hamilton chose the weapons. You can do knives, bare hands, spoons. No. He chose specially made dueling pistols. They had a rifle barrel. They were accurate up to 30 feet. Pistols are really inaccurate. I mean, pistols today are pretty inaccurate for a rifle. Then they're really inaccurate. With a hair trigger. Do you know what I mean by a hair trigger? Just a light pull. By the way, you want a hair trigger even though just a light pull might go. But the lighter the pull, the less chance you'll jerk. Especially with a flintlock musket. It's really easy to jerk. And they're going to meet in Weehawken Island between New Jersey and New York. It wasn't clear which state it is. Because if you go to a place with a pistol, with the stated goal that you're going to shoot somebody, that is a conspiracy to commit murder and you're going to jail. Even if you don't actually do it. You say you're going to do it, and you start the process, you've committed conspiracy. Most people don't realize that. Oh, I was going to rob the bank, and I pulled up and decided not to do it. No, you've committed conspiracy, and you can go to jail. That's a crime. So, Weehawken Island, it was not clear which state it is, so they would fight the Burr-Hamilton duel on this island that it wasn't clear. It's in New York. But what they did is this. Have you ever seen a duel? Oh, they had people roam out there, and all the rowers were supposed to say, we had no idea, we never saw guns. So everyone had plausible deniability. This is murder. Have you ever seen a duel where they go back to back? You ever seen those in movies? And then they turn and shoot? No, they don't do that. They paced off 20 steps, and there's usually somebody who's like a judge. And they either dropped a handkerchief, and when the handkerchief hit the ground, they could fire, or they said, shoot. And they're looking straight forward. So they could say if somebody is actually injured or murdered, they could say, oh, I saw nothing. I was just looking forward. I had no idea. There's all these things now, plausible deniability. Like you're not part of the conspiracy. Then each of them had a second. And the second would stand next to him. So they paced off 20 paces, and there's Hamilton, and you know, they would stand like this. Less body to hit. You don't go, oh, hey, shoot me. So this picture is not accurate. By the way, I love Burr here. He's got it. But the second is standing next to him. Imagine this is Hamilton. The second is here, staring at Burr. And so he could say, I don't know what Hamilton did, but Burr had a gun. Plausible deniability. Now, it was also very common that both sides would show up to the spot then and say, I'm not afraid. Are you afraid? No. Our honor is defended. Go home. They went to the next step. Now, a lot of people believe Hamilton had already decided to do another thing they would do. We've done all the thing. They dropped the handkerchief. Shoot it in the air. We're not going to murder somebody. Honor saved them. We didn't back down. We didn't run away. Well, we don't know what happened because Hamilton was putting the pistol on and fired here. We don't know if he meant to fire in the air or what Burr said he thought. He just missed. If he just hit the hair trigger. The gun went off. So Burr took very careful aim at about 20 paces. You can see his eyes. You see the eye color, his pupils. I always wonder what Hamilton must have felt at that moment when Burr went. And pulled the trigger and went off. Right here. Ripped apart 5 ribs, right through the liver and lung, and lodged next to the heart. Hamilton lived for another day. Can you imagine the agony he must have been going through? Burr murdered Hamilton. The sitting vice president just shot the man who, in many ways, created the financial system of the United States and the Federalist Party. Wow. If people think the political arguments are violent today, okay, they might be, but wow, are they violent then? Burr fled. No one really knew what to do with the sitting vice president who just committed murder, or for that matter, in what state he was in, because this might sound weird. It's not a federal crime yet for the vice president to kill somebody. I should add, it wasn't until after Kennedy was assassinated that it was a federal crime to shoot the president. Yes, that caused some problems in Dallas in 1963. That's another story for down the road. And then the bell rang. I should add, dueling kind of died down in the north. Is that a shock? Where did dueling not die down? Done? What do you have left?
Thank you.
Good. See ya. Good job today. We made it. The long break is over, and now we're back. So tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
See you tomorrow. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Please say you're done. Okay, conclusion?
Of my third rock.
And you can do a break already in the house?
Yeah.
I just want it done. I know you
Yeah,
do.
no, I'm knowing.
We both want it done.
I understand.
Is today the 25th? That sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes. I like the temperature here.
We're good people. Good people.
I think, no, the bell was like a minute late this morning. It rang at like 8. I think
I think it's all messed up today.
They're not exactly on like the time. They're always like almost a minute late. They're very delayed.
There's still a couple people who have not taken their essays, written their essays, taken their essays. But take it home, enjoy. Just gotta get it done.
Yeah, I can do it today. I'm like 6 and 7 because those are like I'm not really okay.
Pass, do you have your outline? I'll take it again. Come on. Oh, we're doing a quiz on chapter 12 tomorrow. I gave you that thing on Tuesday. You got it. Okay.
Oh crap, I cannot.
Yeah, so I do on Tuesday because it's shortened periods, and also when you got to hear the dueling story. We're going to duel today. Somebody will complain.
Oh, I can't even because this is
What
well,
do you
I
have to say?
AP Environmental Science. I need a 7.5 ceramics, and that is like because this class is like the hardest class to make up for no lines. I can even do it now though.
No, we can do it separately. I'm sure that all those classes.
Yeah, like I already know what I do these classes.
I mean, 'cause I hate to take it out of the class. Because study hall wouldn't be a big deal with class.
Yeah, but it's like it's ceramic, like
I know what time's over. So,
true.
okay, I'll tell you what. You get out at 7.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Rookie behind. Yeah. What happened?
I'm gone, so, I don't know. Keep up.
Two things. First off, is it Tom or?
More like, kind of connects with him.
Broken or?
Yeah. Scaffold.
Yeah, okay, I know. And, what did you do with it? I broke my thumb. That's my good one. Keep it the best you can, just write down the main things. And of course you're right. Yeah, of course you're right. Is there anything interesting?
I honestly almost I figured on another soul.
Yeah, I'm.
Dude, I swear. Wait, I was like, dude, I was staying. Yeah.
You did it, and that's it. Mine was loud too, so I didn't have the same issue.
I was so freaking nervous. I swear, like compared to every other game,
See you tomorrow.
like for those,
When did it happen?
It was so bad. Like the Masters.
No, we didn't.
I feel like last year I was like the weather was so bad. I like your shirt.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, Gracie. Oh, you're making I feel like I'm really. No, yeah. No.
Everything she gives me, there's a picture. Okay, so, essays. I got most of them graded. And I got a few more to grade. I'll get them done. My plans are out tomorrow. Someone's going to finish their 7th period.
Yes.
And overall, pleased with them. They've been good. Obviously, I'm always going to find things, but you want me to find things. And so what are we doing tomorrow at the beginning of class? A quiz on chapter 12. It's going to be matching. How many questions do you want?
5.
12. All right, let's go with 12. That sounds good to me. Just 12 matching. It's just going to be matching. And the other thing is, I want to do a kind of a small test, partially for time reasons to get going, but a small unit test over this. So this was the Articles of Confederation through the War of 1812. And so I'm thinking I might do it on Teams on Thursday or Friday. Quick, do it, boom, done, move on. Sound good?
No, like shorter games.
Probably not for this one. Possible choice, team, I'll try to make it as basic as possible. Because we already did the essay test.
And it's just everything.
Yeah.
So we have 2 tests?
Well, the quiz tomorrow is on chapter 12. But then there'll be a test on the, it won't be in chapter 12. I won't include that.
Okay.
I will not include chapter 12 on the unit test. Because when we finish War of 1812, we'll go from there. Yeah. So let's go ahead then and take out your notes and let's finish up Jefferson. Well, finish as close as we can. I got to tell a duel story. We got to fight a duel, don't we? Oh, you want? I'll show you a scary clown down the road. By the way, I'll also tell you why clowns, I would argue, are pretty scary.
I was literally so bad.
Give me a sec.